Tonight I am broadcasting from the Rawah Wilderness in northern Colorado. And one of the reasons I'm out here is because I have been in civilization, or what you could call civilization, for the last couple of months. I came back to Colorado. I had some work to do for a client for a couple of months, and so I've been parked at my parents' house in the town where I grew up for the last 6 to 8 weeks, I think it is. I'm not sure. But civilization has been kind of grating on me. And one of the side effects of being in civilization is flared up my social media addiction like you wouldn't believe. So I decided to take a hiatus from civilization. And if this is a drinking game, every time I say civilization, you should take a drink. You might be dead by the end of this podcast. But anyway, I have been really busy the last several weeks doing a lot of work and covering all sorts of events and new businesses and all sorts of stuff. And I've just really loved it. I've gotten to interview some really fascinating people, and I'm feeling like I'm doing good work. The only bummer is I've been blocked. I've got a couple of deadlines coming up. And it doesn't help that it's just so much easier to jump on TikTok or Instagram, the unholy trinity of social media, including Facebook and email. And the last few days, I've just been stumped. I'm like, I have nothing. I have no words. So I decided to take myself off the grid, get to a place where I didn't have any internet signal, because sometimes that's where I get my best work done, and just kind of make a day or two of it. I'll still be able to get all my other work done, but now that's ironic. I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and I just had a truck drive by. I don't know if you heard that or not. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm hopelessly addicted to TikTok. It's been a couple of months since I've come on here and done a podcast recording. It might have been since February. I took a long break because mostly I was just trying to, tighten the belt, save a lot of my resources. Hosting these podcasts is actually a little bit expensive for my budget, and I don't get a lot of feedback. I don't get a lot of viewership or, listeners or anything like that to warrant paying for it. But it is a good way to make my thoughts clear and put things out there. And I've had a lot of people compliment my podcast. Personally, it would bore the shit out of me, but that's just me. I'm putting myself to sleep as we talk right now. But sometimes it's just nice to have a quiet night to yourself and just reflect and just speak to an empty room with a dog snoring in the background. And sometimes I think ruminating and getting our thoughts out there is one of the best ways that we can actually make contact and connect with other people, because I'm not the only one that thinks these things. And maybe I have a viewer out there or a listener out there that is struggling with the same thing as far as being a creative, or as far as like trying to meet their goals. Maybe they're on the verge of giving up. And one of my favorite little aphorisms anymore is, I think that the rising tide should raise all boats. And I think if creatives are out there sharing their experiences, their challenges, then maybe we can kind of help each other out and weather through a lot of these things. And tonight, the night is absolutely beautiful. It's summertime. The last time I recorded a podcast, I believe I was in... Where was I? I think I might have been in Arizona still. I might have been leaving Lake Havasu. I might have been in Utah. And, over the last several months, it's incredible the places that I've been to. And I'm really enjoying this lifestyle. I really like getting out, meeting new people, having a lot of time to myself, a lot of solitude. The places that I go that are out in the middle of nowhere give me a chance to actually kind of buckle down and be creative without a lot of distraction, because I'm the kind of person that, even though I'm fairly introverted, I do like my socialization. I do like being around people. And if I have an internet connection, that's close enough. It's kind of like the methadone of socialization. So there are times that I will just be online, or I will call friends and we'll talk for 4 or 5 hours, which I think would make fascinating podcasts. But a lot of my friends don't agree, and they don't want to be broadcast out there. Maybe it's too personal. I don't know. I've been warned. So no, I'm not going to put any of my friends out on a podcast unless they actually request that. But more dead air. Where was I? Civilization. Take a drink. One of the crazy things about this lifestyle is it's usually just Penny and I. And I'll give you kind of a rundown what we've been doing for the last several months. I think one of the last broadcasts that I did was leaving Lake Havasu. And after I left Lake Havasu, I traveled north into Arizona, into northern Arizona, and then crossed over into Utah. And we even kind of skimmed Las Vegas. I'm not a big Las Vegas fan. It's just kind of not my thing. I get cranky whenever I lose money. So one of the last times I actually gambled, a buddy of mine took me to Black Hawk in Colorado. And I had more fun actually pulling the tags out that were like 2 or 3 cents that people cashed out or hadn't cashed out because it wasn't a big win. And I was playing like penny slots with these 2 and 3 cent tags. And sometimes I'd be up like $4 or $5 and then I'd lose it. At one point, I was walking by an ATM machine and I noticed that somebody had just left a $20 bill hanging out of the ATM machine. And I just kind of grabbed it as I passed because nobody was around to claim it. And it wasn't like, Anyway, there's a little gray area for moral value right there. Anyway, snagged the $20, stuck it in my pocket, and the buddy that had taken me to Black Hawk proceeded to go up $600 playing slots. And then by the end of the night, he was down $300. And so I was the big winner with my $20 that I pulled out of the ATM machine. I get cranky. I just won't gamble. I just stop. I think I limit myself to maybe $10 or $20 if I do gamble. And it usually pisses me off when I lose all of that. And it's pretty quickly. The charm of the casino for me is gone because you can no longer go there and get like the all-you-can-eat buffet. They don't give you free drinks anymore. And if they do, you have to tip a lot. I'm notoriously cheap when it comes to casinos. I think I'm like an older era, And so anyway, I didn't go to Las Vegas. I camped out in the desert, not far from Las Vegas. And then I drove up into St. George, Utah, and then Cedar City. And with my tax return at the time, I believe I bought a set of tires. And I needed a set of tires for the bus because what I had been using on this thing were the original bus tires, which were like slicks. They almost had no traction. And it was getting pretty hairy, some of the places that I had to drive, especially if there was mud or ice or anything like that. I was not a fan. So Cedar City, I went to Les Schwab Tires. They gave me the hookup as far as tires went. Shout out to Les Schwab. And then I proceeded to kind of hang out around St. George for a couple of weeks. I also checked out Bryce Canyon and Zion National Park and checked out, I think it's called Parowan Gap. And they have petroglyphs over at Parowan Gap. And so I kind of bummed around that area, St. George and Cedar City, Utah, for a couple or 3 weeks. Well, I decided that it was time to start heading west. I had aspirations to check out some national parks in California, and I had the new game changer on my rig, which was the diesel heater, which I got also with tax money when I was in Lake Havasu. Installed it myself out in the middle of the desert. I'm pretty handy with a hole saw, and it worked great until it didn't. So that was kind of a bummer, but I'll get into that in a little bit, hopefully, if I remember. So I headed across from St. George, Utah, and into Nevada. And I came across this one place that was just incredible. And it was, for me, it kind of felt like the same level of emotion that you hear about when people visit Auschwitz or Dachau or any of those places that were Holocaust death camps. And I visited the Mountain Meadows Massacre area, and that was just incredible. I didn't know much about that area other than things that I'd seen in a few movies. I think one of them was Under the Banner of Heaven, which was based off a Jon Krakauer novel. And I just didn't know about the history, and it was really horrific. I mean, basically, these settlers from Arkansas that were headed towards California, they got waylaid, and a lot of the locals, the local Mormon population, dressed up as Paiute Indians and ambushed them, and they were under siege for several days in September. And eventually the settlers surrendered because they're running out of food and ammunition. They were wounded, and they allowed themselves to be separated out, the women and the children and the men of the group. And I believe it was 34 of the settlers were executed in this area in Mountain Meadows. And they separated out the women. They marched them about a mile away from where the siege had taken place. And they executed all the women and children that were 5 years old and older. And then all of the men were simultaneously executed once they started hearing the bullets from the distance. The whole area just felt heavy. Just the way that everything is laid out, it was just really emotional. And so I continued to head out across Nevada, and I cut across. The bummer is I was kind of hoping to really extend my stay in Nevada, but the wind was blowing terribly. So what I did was I actually got on a section of highway, the extraterrestrial highway, and kind of skirted past Area 51, which was kind of fascinating. And you can read about that on my blog. That's at www.shakesomedust.com, and that's shake-some-dust.com. And I talk about the extraterrestrial highway, and I got buzzed by a couple of F-22s when I was camping out in the desert, and there were sonic booms all night. It was definitely a welcome experience as opposed to Mountain Meadows and how heavy that was in that area. So I left Nevada. I crossed Nevada in a couple of days, and I had expected to be out there for at least a few weeks. I was going to take my time to hit California, but the wind was just blowing constantly, and it was actually fairly cold. So right around this time, I started kind of having some problems with my diesel heater, and it would basically warm up, and then it would just kind of foul out, and I couldn't get it to run sometimes. And it was still getting pretty cold up in the high country. It's like a high desert in that area, and in February, March, it still gets pretty cold at night. So I continued on, and I went through, I think it's Tonopah, and it's a town kind of on the border of California and Nevada. And they have the infamous Haunted Clown Hotel there, and also a haunted insane asylum, which is actually for sale for $50,000. So if you think housing prices are bad, you can at least buy an insane asylum, and it's probably something like, I don't know, 20,000 square feet. of stone building, but it's haunted. And there's not a lot in that town other than that and the Clown Hotel. I thought I was going to get a Walmart at some point, but in Nevada, it seems like there's only Walmart in a couple of places like Las Vegas, Elko, and maybe Lake Tahoe. So I kind of just skedaddled over into California, and I wound up camping out in Bishop, California for about 3 or 4 weeks. And it's right at the foot of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And it is a neat little town. If you ever get into Bishop, check it out. It's a beautiful town. And there's a lot of stuff going on in that town. If you're into hiking and climbing and that kind of stuff, it's right next to the Pacific Crest Trail. It looked like it was all kind of socked in still at that time. I believe I was there in March, maybe the beginning of April. And it was pretty cool. They had all sorts of gear shops, for climbing and hiking and all that kind of stuff. And, it was just kind of a neat experience to be there. I decided that I was going to go check out Yosemite, which is what brought me to Bishop. The bummer is that at that time of year, you can get to, well, not at that time of year, but they have a road called the Lee Vining Road, and it's kind of over by Mammoth Lakes. But at that time of year, it's still closed. They don't open it up until June. So it would have been an hour drive to get to Yosemite from Bishop. But because I was there in April, I had to drive all the way down to Modesto, California, and I stayed over at Lake Isabella for probably a week or two, and then headed up through the Central Valley and eventually made it over into Yosemite. So it was basically an hour drive turned into 400 miles out of my way. But it was kind of a neat experience. I'd never really spent much time in that area, and it was pretty cool because spring was really starting to kind of come in that part of California. So everything was covered in wildflowers over in Lake Isabella, and we got to see what we could see of the eclipse at that time, which was pretty cool. It was not nearly as cool as when I saw the eclipse at Chaco Canyon. What do they call that? The annular eclipse. Oh my gosh. I might have to edit some of this stuff. But the annular eclipse in October in that part of New Mexico, when I was at Chaco Canyon, it was dead center in the sun, and this was just kind of like a chunk, like somebody taking a bite out of a chocolate chip cookie. I still had my eclipse glasses left over from the last eclipse and everything. So mostly we spent that day photographing lizards that were out on rocks, and then headed out to the Central Valley and back up into Sequoia National Park. Funny thing about Sequoia National Park is I picked up some hitchhikers that were, they had basically abandoned their Tesla, and they said that the Tesla didn't have enough battery juice to get them up the hill to where they were going, so they hitched a ride with me, and I drove them all the way up to the top of the mountain at Sequoia National Park. They were Mexican nationals, actually, and I think they were working at the resort at the top of the mountain, and they just needed a ride up there, and they even paid me. It was funny because I didn't know they were hitchhiking. They were just kind of flagging people down, and I stopped and I asked if they needed any help, and they said, basically the girl shoved money in my face and said, "If you take us to the top, we'll pay you." And I was like, sold, because gasoline jumped from $4 a gallon in Nevada to right around five, if not higher, in California. So it was brutal trying to put gas in my bus all the time because I don't get the best mileage in the bus, but I like to go see places. And California got really tough. So Sequoia National Park was one day. I got to see the giant trees. It was all snowy up there still. And then I took a couple of days to get over to Yosemite National Park. And I got to see, Half Dome and El Cap and all those cool places. I didn't really do any hiking or anything like that, but mostly because my feet were kind of screwed up. When I was in Lake Havasu, my brakes had gone out. I think I mentioned that in the earlier podcast. So I spent 2 days walking around Lake Havasu on foot, and it really irritated the hell out of some plantar fasciitis that I had. So getting old kind of sucks. You have these things happen to you once in a while, and unless you want to be under the surgeon's knife perpetually, you either just kind of deal with it or hope it heals up on you. So my feet were really hurting bad, and I just couldn't do it. So I walked around, took a lot of pictures, like at Bridal Veil Falls, those kind of places, and then we were outside of Yosemite for a couple of days over by Groveland, and we got snowed in a little bit in Groveland. Groveland, I don't know. It was beautiful out there. We got about a foot of snow at one point when we were up in the mountains and just kind of enjoyed ourselves. And, Penny and I played a lot of tennis ball and took a lot of really cool pictures. At that point, however, my new camera lens that I'd gotten stopped working. So it actually stopped working in Yosemite, and I couldn't get any good zoom-in pictures of people climbing the rocks. So I decided to head up to Redding. They had a Best Buy up in Redding, and then I was going to get my lens repaired up there. So we headed out and cut back into the Central Valley, went through Sacramento and all these other places, and found ourselves at Red Bluffs, which was kind of a weird experience. I'm working on an article about how California is not really the most hospitable place anymore to free-spirited van lifers. And one of the things that I found out when we were in this part of California was the BLM land. BLM is like the gold standard as far as like you can go someplace and stay there for a couple of weeks for free. And it makes this lifestyle somewhat affordable. Bummer is in Red Bluffs, California, they had BLM land, but they said, you can only park in, or you can't camp in places that are blocked off, but everything was blocked off. So I camped at a trailhead, and about 3 a.m, I hear people like outside whooping and hollering and doing donuts in their car. And then they stop and they all get out of their car and they're like surrounding my bus and they start singing the Star Spangled Banner at the top of their lungs. It just sounded like a bunch of drunk kids. So that was a little bit unsettling. It's like, what the hell is going to happen here? So they drove off, and then the next day I decided, I wasn't going to stay there another night, not with that kind of goofiness going on. So I drove around looking for maybe another spot, and then I saw the car that was parked outside of my bus that night. And I would say, it's a bunch of local drunken teens, but it wasn't. It had Oregon plates, and the place just reeked of marijuana. It smelled like they were just baking themselves out and getting drunk and everything else like that. And I thought, this sucks. So I headed up to Redding, went to Best Buy, and then they said, your lens can be repaired in about 2 weeks. So I was like, all right, I guess I will park it for a couple of weeks and I'll pick up my lens when I get paid. And so I went up into the mountains over by Weaverville, California, and found a really neat camping spot by the Trinity River. It didn't have much internet connection, though, which was kind of nice because I was able to be very productive. And the bummer is that my invoicing software, I thought that I had sent my invoices out, but because I wasn't getting solid internet connection, it saved it to a draft folder. And my invoices that were supposed to bring in my income for the next month didn't go out. So 2 weeks of being up in the mountains and, bathing in the river and washing my clothes in the river and going on hikes with my dog. And we'd have to hike like half a mile just to get an internet signal and getting a lot of work done and writing and stuff like that. I was like, hey, how come my check hasn't arrived yet? And they said, what do you mean? You never invoiced us. I was like, oh, crap. So I looked through my files and no, the invoice never deployed. And I said, hey, is there any way you can pay me now? And they said, no, you're going to have to wait until the next billing cycle. So I had another 2 weeks of basically living off of what I had in my food stores. I had some old lentils and some ramen and cup noodles, and I got down to bare bones, like literally scraping the bottom of the barrel. And a couple weeks later, I finally got paid. I had some help from my folks because I was just really in a bad way. I show up in Reading at the Best Buy. It's been 2 weeks. I'm like, hey, I haven't heard back from you guys. And they said, your lens basically got junked out. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with it. So that was a thing. So I'd sat around in Reading for 2 weeks, and that was no fun. So I waited a little bit longer until I got paid, and then I went back into Oregon. So I crossed, past Mount Shasta, went into Oregon, and I had a little bit of money to work with, at least enough to get out of California. Gas prices dropped about $1 a gallon. And Ashland, Oregon was just so cool. So I was up in Ashland for a couple of weeks. But the funny thing is one of the first nights that I got there, I spoke with people at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. That's the thing that they do up in Ashland. And it sounds like Shakespeare in the Park, which I guess is what it used to be, but it's no longer that. They actually have a whole compound that has 3 permanent theaters, and they run several plays throughout the summer, actually from March until September. So it's nearly 6 months of plays that they do. And I got to see my first Shakespearean play in person. I was an English major, which is kind of funny that I didn't get to see Shakespeare live. I've only seen it in movies, and I've read the plays out of the books. But I got to see Macbeth, and it was my first Shakespearean play. The production value was incredible, and I got to see that based off of... it was kind of funny because I went to the box office, and I said, hey, they told me at the visitor center that you guys had like a friends and family discount. And they said, we don't have that, but we do have like an indigent program. Do you qualify? And I said, well, I live off of very limited income, and I live in a school bus. So does that qualify? And they said, yes, that qualifies. So I was able to get discounted tickets, and I got all-day parking for really cheap, pretty nearby. And I walked around downtown in Ashland for a while, and then I went and saw the play, and I thought, well, I can hang out and maybe, socialize with some people at like a brew pub or something like that. And I thought, my feet are really tired. I'm still having foot problems. And I thought, well, why don't I just find a campsite while it's still light outside, and then I'll come back tomorrow. So I go out up into the mountains above Ashland, and I conk out at about 9:30, maybe 10 o'clock at night. I am just beat from the day. And I woke up the next morning, nearly 12 hours later, and I open up the door, and we had gotten 3 feet of snow in the night, and it had just dumped on us. And there was no way I could get out of there. I mean, we were stuck. And so basically we just kind of hunkered down for the next week. Luckily, I had a little bit of food in the bus. And the bummer is that my diesel heater stopped working at that point because something was goofy with the electrical. It was just not drawing enough power to actually heat up the glow plug to make the diesel heater work. So I fiddled with it, worked with it a couple of times, and then the glow plug turned out to have been cracked. And that's one of the reasons it wasn't firing up. So I was able to order another glow plug with my scant internet connection, because once again we had to walk up the top of a hill to get any kind of signal. And so we were up there for 4 or 5 days. And I had a part on order, had it sent to Medford in Oregon, which was just a few miles away. And as we're waiting for the snow to melt, we were the only people up there for days and days, running out of food, running out of fuel. I was using my little propane heater to heat the bus, and it was just kind of a miserable, stressful experience. It was actually worse than being camped outside of Weaverville, because there was all this snow, and I thought, what the heck? Are we going to run out of everything? Are we going to die out here? I mean, those kind of things go through your head. And one of the reasons for that was because we'd gotten so much snow that it had covered up my solar panels on the bus. So I had about 3 feet of snow on top of my solar panels. And unlike Champaign, Colorado powder, the snow that came down there was like concrete, and it was just boom. And I had stuffed my cooler. It's kind of like a Yeti cooler, but it's a mule cooler. And I'd stuffed it with snow, and it was melting down to about a third of that being water. So I stuffed it full of snow and put my perishable stuff in there and turned off my fridge so I could conserve power, because with my solar panels covered, I was getting no power whatsoever. So that was kind of wild. Everything was running out. My power, my fuel, my diesel, everything was just going. So eventually somebody had driven by with a pickup truck, and I was able to drive out 4 or 5 days later through their ruts. And we got back to Ashland, and then Medford. I picked up my glow plug for the diesel heater, and camped outside of Medford for a few days, and saw a bear. Penny chased a bear up a hill, so that was pretty wild. And the funny thing is she's afraid of the vacuum, but she's not afraid of a big-ass 300-pound bear, and she chased it. Everything was okay with that, though. We wound up, when I finally got paid, we went up through Grants Pass, Oregon, and out to the coast, and went down to, Crescent City, California. So we went back down into California just to hit the coast, and then took Pacific Coast Highway north up along the coast for the next few days. Now, the plan is to basically kind of make a beeline back for Colorado, because I had a lot of work that I had to do, and summer was starting and all the activities in Walden were starting up. So I needed to get back there for all that stuff. So anyway, the Oregon coast was incredible. It was just gorgeous. But the bummer was, from Redding all the way up through until Florence, Oregon, when we headed back to Colorado, the ticks were out of control. There were ticks everywhere, and I probably pulled 3 or 4 off of Penny every day. Sometimes they'd be embedded, sometimes they'd just be crawling around on her. I only had one attached to me, and it didn't embed, but it was still gross, and I was just felt like my skin was crawling constantly. So we kind of did the Florence thing. We saw the Rhododendron Festival, headed back over the Cascades, and then back to Colorado. And this is where it kind of gets interesting as far as the bus stuff goes, the electrical. We stopped off in Ketchum, Idaho, and there was a place, kind of by Sun City, Idaho, and there was a place that builds vans, like conversion vans. And I stopped off there and asked them if they did any kind of electrical work, because that's one of the reasons we were heading back to Colorado early, was so I could get some help fixing the electrical on my bus, because it just didn't feel like it was getting enough power to power up the heater, even when the glow plug was replaced, and it just wasn't working. So I stopped off at this conversion van place, and they looked at it and they said, yeah, we can fix that. It'll be about an hour, it'll be $125 an hour. And I said, can you do it today? And I was just really on the verge of, my money situation once again, because I was just kind of running out of funds. And they said, yeah. And it was totally worth it. Totally worth $125. The guy actually took 2 hours to do it. He didn't charge me for one of the hours. And apparently my electrical system wasn't grounded properly, so I wasn't getting nearly the amount of voltage that I was supposed to get through to power up my heater or a lot of my other internal bus stuff. And it also turned out that I had a wire that was being grounded out for the sink. So I have a pump that makes the sink run, and it was like this single filament rigid wire, and it had basically just worn through because everything vibrates on the bus, and it was grounding out and blowing fuses. And so the guy fixed everything, and everything worked again. The heater was working again. And the bummer is I was already halfway back to Colorado by the time I stopped there, and it was like, well, I might as well just continue on. So I took, I'd say probably about a week to get back to Colorado. I stayed at a couple of places. I stayed in Ketchum, Idaho for about 3 or 4 days. And then I stayed a couple of nights over in Eastern Oregon. Actually, I kind of got that flipped. I stayed in Eastern Oregon before I even got out there, and found all sorts of cool obsidian over at these obsidian cliffs. And then in Idaho, that's where I stayed in Ketchum for about 4 or 5 days. And then I headed back to Colorado. And that's where I've been in civilization ever since. But it was good to see my folks. It was good to kind of have some roots for a few days. I've been getting a lot of interviews done and everything else. But the bummer is being around people has kind of thrown off my game. And out here, out on the road, I'm not around people a lot. And I gotten to like that sometimes because I just let myself get so distracted. And especially with social media, especially with like socializing with people or calling people or whatever, there is just a lot of stuff going on. And I get kind of complacent. I get kind of lazy. And it's like, no, I need to write. I need to work. That's where I'm actually very happy, is when I can actually get words down. But even in North Park, it gets hot during the day. The bus gets to about 92, 94 degrees. Penny's inside with my folks, but I'm out here trying to work. And it doesn't always work that great. So I'm out here sweating and usually taking a nap because it's so hot. And then at the end of the day, I just don't want to do anything, which really sucks. So I'm meeting my deadlines at least. I'm getting that kind of stuff done. I'm visiting people. I'm, interviewing and all that other great stuff, which is what I'm supposed to be doing. But my game just kind of feels like it's been thrown off. And I almost have this reluctance to get out on the road and see things. It's like, I don't know. It's just easier to just be kind of hunkered down. And I think I've been like that since Reading. And I think that kind of experience of like, oh no, I have no money, I have to really conserve, kind of traumatized me a little bit with that kind of thing. So threw off my game a little bit, and I just haven't felt like myself. I feel like maybe there's even a temptation of the sticks and bricks lifestyle. And, you kind of wonder about that because you do get lonely out on the road. And sometimes you meet some really cool people and they make you really consider like, well, what if I just did this part-time? I could get like an apartment someplace, or I could settle down or do whatever. And then I would have like a core of people around me that were really awesome. And that would be like a neater long-term goal, I think. But right now, at least for the next few years, I need to be out on the road. I need to be doing this while I can still physically and mentally do it. And we'll see what happens. That's been the plan, is I want to do this for a few years, and, maybe I won't be doing it forever. Maybe I will be. I don't know. But I have to give myself a shot to do it. And that's pretty much it. I'm a little bit more productive when I'm away from civilization, take a drink, and there are some temptations. You do meet some really neat people, and you do really think, how would my life be if I wasn't on the road all the time? If I had, regular hot showers again, or, a smaller car that I could just kind of do little day trips. And, you kind of think about these things. It's very tempting. But then when I'm actually out on the road, when I'm actually seeing new things and having new experiences and things like that, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else right now. So in a weird way, it's kind of a lonely experience, but it's still very fulfilling. And it actually kind of drives me nuts to be rooted in one place for too long. So tonight has been good. I've been sitting down and getting a lot of work done. I started a draft for a story that has a deadline in a couple of weeks. And I had been so blocked on that because I've been having a hell of a time getting people to call me back for the interview for the story. So, that's kind of a bummer. But at least I got a lot of words down. I feel a little bit more confident in where it's going, what I need to say. So that'll be good. I hope. I've got another story coming up. The deadline is the end of next month, and I'm really excited about that. I had a great interview with the person that I was doing the story on, and it actually wound up taking a whole other angle with the editor, and I'm still able to use a lot of this stuff, but it's going to be a little bit different than I thought it was going to be going in. I've got probably 2 or 3 other stories that are out there that I need to finish up that don't have definite deadlines as of yet, but I'm getting the work coming in. I've got a couple of different clients that I work with, and, things are looking up, things are improving, and gosh, just the idea of being able to build a business myself, like to do something that I've always wanted to do, and it's happening. I mean, I'm writing full time now, and it's incredible. I wouldn't think it was like this. I'm not making a ton of money, but I am wealthy in other ways because I'm actually happy doing what I do. And I love interviewing people. I love getting to see new things. The wordplay, like I just get to sit down and construct sentences. The other day I had some revisions for another story that's going to come out in fall for a fishing magazine. And it just felt so good to do these revisions. And I'd fought them for probably 2 or 3 days. Once I sat down and actually did them, it was great. I was like, wow. A bad day writing is better than any day of sitting in an office and watching the clock tick your life away. That's how I feel about it. I also have been getting really into photography. Oh, story on my lens. The funny thing about that is they just junked out the lens and they gave me a gift card, so I had to buy a different lens. So I got that going for me. But I've been taking all sorts of pictures. I did my first rodeo photo shoot, and it felt great because it was such a good way to get you into figuring out how to do photojournalistic, taking action shots, composition on the fly. It was just a great experience, and I had a lot of pictures come out really cool. So I've got that too, and the writing, the photography, those are both things that I really enjoy doing. I love doing them, and I don't know. I'm not sure if I could do these kind of things if I did live in sticks and bricks. And maybe we'll see what happens in a couple of years. Maybe I can build a decent base of clients, and maybe I can afford to have that kind of lifestyle. I don't know. Like I said, we'll see what happens. So that's tonight's rambling, and hopefully you've enjoyed the experience along with me. And that's it for tonight. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.